I was 22 years old when I found myself at a Halloween party thrown by my former best friend Nick, the same Nick who would tragically die of a heroin overdose in 2013. Before his death, Halloween was his absolute favorite time of year. Every October, without fail, he'd throw these massive parties at his house. His parents always flew out to New York to attend their own friend's celebration, leaving the place entirely in Nick's hands. And Nick? He was obsessed with Halloween. I mean, truly obsessed. He transformed his entire house into a full-blown horror show. Every room packed with props that were so grotesquely realistic, you'd swear they were from a professional haunted attraction. Everyone knew he spent way too much money on it all, but nobody could deny the effect. He even went so far as to build massive walls out of cardboard, covering them with dark, tattered wallpaper to create a homemade haunted maze that twisted through parts of the house. It was both ridiculous and kind of brilliant. Now, I want to keep this story PG-13, so I'll skip over the obvious. The weed, the beer, the LSD, the sex. You know the drill. Let's just fast forward to the part where things started to unravel. I'll admit, we were all in altered states. None of us were exactly in control of our minds. But that was normal for Nick's parties. Anyone who'd been to one before knew what to expect. Me, Nick, and a few other guys, Vinny G, Joey, and Q, were holed up in Nick's room upstairs. We were sitting in a hazy circle, passing around a bong, when it happened. Two loud, steady bangs echoed from downstairs. They weren't just knocks. These were deep, hollow thuds, like something heavy slamming into a wall or door. They cut through the music, the laughter, the haze in our heads, and froze us mid-laugh. Nick stood up clumsily, visibly shaken, but trying to keep his cool. Panic was crawling just beneath the surface of his expression. He rushed to the door and flung it open without a word. That's when we heard it. Screaming. Not the playful, exaggerated screams you'd expect from a Halloween party. No, this was different. It was raw. It was real. Voices, male and female, were shrieking from downstairs. Not just one or two, but a crowd. Dozens of voices overlapping in pure terror, like something had gone horribly wrong. And in that moment, as I sat frozen in the corner of Nick's room, the fog in my mind started to lift, just enough for fear to slip in. We all started shouting at Nick, telling him to get back in the room and shut the door, now. Even in our altered state, dulled and clouded by drugs, something primal kicked in. We knew something was wrong, deeply wrong. Nick didn't hesitate. He bolted back inside, shutting the door quickly, but this time carefully, quietly. His hands trembled slightly as he twisted the lock behind him. The soft click of it settling into place felt like a fragile shield against whatever chaos was unfolding downstairs. Then he turned around. The look on his face, it said everything. His skin had gone pale, his eyes wide and glassy, like he'd just stared into something he couldn't process. A haunted, frozen expression, like he had just witnessed a murder. "What did you see? What's going on?" we all cried out at once, voices overlapping, nearly panicked. But Nick didn't answer our questions. He just whispered, "Hide." Nothing else. No explanation. Just that one word. And we didn't need more. We understood. Somehow, instinctively. The way he said it, it told us this wasn't some prank or party gone wrong. This was real. The kind of real that makes your veins run cold. Nick immediately killed the lights. The room was swallowed in darkness, only faint glimmers of streetlights slipping through the blinds. Without speaking, we scattered to hide. Nick and Joey crammed themselves into the closet, pressing back behind coats and junk. I crawled under the bed, wedged in tight alongside Q. Vinny G slipped into the old storage trunk at the foot of the bed. It groaned under his weight, but stayed shut. Then we waited. The muffled bass of the party music downstairs kept thumping for a few more seconds, until it didn't. Suddenly, silence. Then, click. The music cut off, the power yanked like a plug had been ripped from the wall. And that's when we heard him. A man, a fully grown man bellowing from downstairs, his voice harsh, aggressive, commanding, telling everyone to shut up. There was panic in the room below. I could feel it like static in the air, even through the floorboards. Then, someone screamed. A girl. It wasn't just a scream of fear, it was pure terror. The kind of scream that shoots through your spine and sets every nerve on fire. And then, bang! Another loud noise, something slamming or breaking, something final. And after that, silence. Choking, suffocating silence. Then the man started shouting again, angry, threatening, words spilling out in a frenzy. But from under the bed, my heart pounding so hard I could barely think, the words were garbled, distant. I couldn't make them out clearly, and honestly, I didn't want to. All I could focus on was the sound of his rage, the twisted tone, the way it filled every corner of the house. Then came another voice, and another. 2 more men, arguing, yelling, barking commands. By now, it was obvious. There were at least 3 of them, 3 intruders. But for all we knew, there could have been 5 or 10. We had no way of knowing. And as we stayed frozen in the dark, barely daring to breathe, that terrifying uncertainty became its own kind of nightmare. Then came the sound we'd been dreading. Heavy boots, deliberate and unhurried, stomped up the staircase. Each step creaked under the weight, sharp, rhythmic thuds growing louder, more real. Then they paused, halfway down the hallway, right outside our bedroom door. I could hear the intruder on the other side, the faint rustle of fabric, the shift of weight on wooden floorboards. Then, click, click, he tried the doorknob. It jiggled once, then again, and when he realized it was locked, the first hit came. A deep, brutal thud, as if a shoulder had been slammed into the door. Then again, harder, the door rattled violently in its frame. Another hit. The wood cracked, groaned, but held. We were all frozen, our breathing shallow, our minds racing. Hiding places suddenly felt paper-thin. Then came the sound that made my blood freeze. Pop, pop, pop. Gunshots. Not distant, not somewhere in the house. Right there, at the doorknob. The sound was deafening in the confined space. A burst of violent thunder as the lock was shattered by bullets. The door creaked once, then slowly swung open. From downstairs came more cries, screams, sharp and desperate, echoing through the house in the aftermath of the shots. Then, silence. Another gunshot, and then nothing. Under the bed, I felt my chest tightening. My lungs burned from trying not to make a sound. My hand was clenched over my mouth, and beside me, Q was doing the same. I saw Nick too, his hand over his own face in the dark, eyes wide with panic. No one dared to move. Through the thin, dusty veil of transparent fabric hanging from the edge of Nick's bed frame, I watched the boots step into view. Black, scuffed, thick-soled boots, overlapping ripped denim jeans just above them. He walked with confidence, with a kind of casual cruelty. The boots moved toward the closet, then stopped. He opened the door. From inside came a voice, Nick's voice, choked with fear, cracking. "Please, please don't kill me," he begged. "I'll give you anything. I'll give you money, a lot of it. Just don't kill me, please." His voice quivered, desperate and raw. I could hear every syllable. He wasn't trying to be brave. He was trying to survive. He confessed that he owned the house, said he was the one responsible. The words poured out like a flood. It was his last-ditch effort. Give them what they wanted, and maybe walk away alive. The intruder said nothing. Then, in a tone I couldn't hear clearly, ordered Nick downstairs. And Nick went. I heard the shifting of weight, then the footsteps, then silence. Joey, somehow, hadn't been found in the closet with him. Maybe he managed to wedge himself behind something or slip away when the door opened. I still don't know how he pulled it off. The rest of us stayed hidden, still shaking, still unable to breathe properly. Hearts pounding so loud it was like a second pulse in my ears. Under the bed, it felt like time itself had frozen. Downstairs, we could hear voices, low, muffled. Nick was talking, so were the intruders, but it was impossible to make out the words. The whole house had this awful, pressurized silence like it was holding its breath. It felt like 20 minutes passed. Could have been 5. Could have been an hour. But then, slam! The front door shut. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Nick burst back into the room, his face slick with sweat, his eyes wild. "They're gone!" he gasped. "They're gone!" I think the most horrifying moment of my life, worse than the gunshots, worse than the hiding, worse than the fear, was what I saw when I finally stepped downstairs, back into the living room. 2 bodies, lying there, lifeless, so still it didn't even feel real at first. My brain refused to process it. Blood pooled beneath their heads, a dark, glistening mess that soaked into the floorboards like ink spreading on a page. Their faces were pale, mouths parted slightly, eyes wide open and glassy. There was no motion, no twitch, no breath. Jen and Robbie, 2 friends, good friends. They were just gone. I'll never forget the way that room smelled either. The iron tang of blood, thick in the air. The remnants of sweat, alcohol, cheap plastic from party props, and weed. So much weed. The whole house reeked like a marijuana greenhouse, like someone had burned pounds of it in every room. I won't go into the full details of what happened when the police finally arrived. There's not much to say about it that isn't already obvious. The flashing red and blue lights, the chaos, the blur of questions and sobbing. Everyone was numb or broken. But what struck me most was how little the cops seemed to care about the drugs. The smell of pot clung to everything, but it didn't matter. That wasn't the focus. Not when there were 2 dead college students lying on the floor in pools of their own blood. No, all they cared about was finding out who the masked men were, who had done this. Nick, once we had a chance to breathe again, once it was over, told the 4 of us who had been hiding upstairs with him the full truth. There weren't 3 intruders. There were 4. All of them dressed the same. Dark fedoras, long trench coats, gloves, and those eerie white vendetta masks, emotionless, grinning, just standing there like they'd stepped out of a nightmare. They had come demanding money, 100,000 in cash. Nick told them he didn't have it. Of course he didn't. So they handed him a sack, just some regular empty duffel, and ordered him to fill it with the most valuable possessions in the house. Every guest at the party, those still alive, had been herded into one room and held hostage. The intruders forced each one to toss their wallets, phones, anything of worth into that same bag. Or else. They said anyone who refused would be shot, and they meant it. After the incident, things were never the same. Nick unraveled. It started slowly, just drinking more than usual. Then he started missing school. Then completely stopped going. He was spiraling fast. Then the heavier drugs came. Meth, heroin. The party guy, the Halloween mastermind, the loudest voice in the room, became a ghost of himself. I only had one real talk with him after that night, just one. It was late. He had tears in his eyes, a pipe in his hand. His voice was tired, so tired. He told me he couldn't stop thinking about it, about how he had caused the death of 2 of his closest friends. And not in some indirect way. In his mind, he truly believed it was his fault. That if he hadn't thrown that party, if he hadn't opened the door, if he hadn't been too high to think straight. He said he lived in constant pain. That night broke something in him that never healed. Nick died of a heroin overdose in July of 2013, not even a year after it happened. It was my first Halloween living alone, my very first one away from my parents. The house was a small corner lot, no second floor, just a main level and a basement. Quiet neighborhood, modest place. My parents had helped me with half the cost, kind of a graduation gift, so it felt like mine, but not entirely. Still, I was proud of it. That night, it was just me, curled up on the couch in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, watching a marathon of Halloween horror movies. The lights were low, the candy bowl half empty, and the clock on the wall had just struck 11 p.m. I was dozing off a little when a knock came at the front door. I stood up, halfway to the entrance before pausing mid-step. Who the hell would be knocking at 11 p.m.? There hadn't been a trick-or-treater in over an hour, not this late. The porch light was still on, but Halloween was winding down. Streets were empty. It was quiet outside. I figured it had to be a prank. Ding-dong ditchers, I thought. Just some bored kids trying to squeeze one last scare out of the night. I waited a beat, then glanced sideways out the window toward the porch. Nobody. They were already gone. Yup, I told myself, just stupid kids. I dropped back onto the couch, more annoyed than anything, and focused on the movie again. But before I could even settle back in, knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. I stared at the door, then shouted, "Get lost!" I wasn't in the mood to play games with a bunch of punk kids. I figured they'd get bored and move on once they knew I wasn't biting. But they didn't. They ignored me completely. The knocking escalated fast, from tapping to pounding, violent, relentless fists slamming against the front door like they were trying to break through. Now I was pissed. I jumped up, stormed to the entrance, and flung the door wide open. Empty. No one. The porch was quiet again. Still. Just the cool night air and a faint breeze rustling the trees. No footsteps running off, no laughter. Just nothing. I slipped on my shoes, stepping outside, jaw tight. I scanned the bushes to the right of the porch. Nothing. Checked behind my car in the driveway. Still nothing. Even looked across the street. No signs of movement anywhere. The kids, if that's what they were gone. I was done playing along. Feeding into their fun was exactly what they wanted. So I gave up, marched back inside, double-locked the front door, deadbolt and knob, and headed straight to my bedroom. Locked that door too, just for a little extra peace of mind. I don't know why. Maybe it was silly, but it made me feel safer. I turned up the TV to drown out the echo in my head. But even over the sound of slasher screams and eerie music, I could still hear it. Pounding. That same fist-hammering assault on the front door. Again, again, again. I sat there in my bed, frozen, fists clenched in the blanket. Still thinking it had to be those kids. Still telling myself it wasn't anything serious. But the pounding didn't stop. It just kept going. 10 minutes, 15, 20. More than half an hour passed, and it hadn't let up once. That was when something in my stomach twisted. It wasn't just a prank anymore. It felt off. Too desperate, too intense. I started thinking maybe they were filming some stupid YouTube video, trying to get a viral reaction, hoping I'd lose my mind and run out screaming. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I sat there, watching the TV, trying to pretend none of it was happening. But the pounding at the door just kept going, and going, and going. At some point, I must have dozed off. The TV was still on, low and flickering with dim blue light across the walls. The pounding must have stopped long enough for my brain to shut down from exhaustion. I don't even remember falling asleep. But when I woke up, it was back. Knock, knock, knock. Only this time, something was different. I rubbed my eyes, heart already pounding before I could even sit up. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. 2 a.m. 2 in the fucking morning. My stomach dropped. How the hell could those kids still be at it? I reached over and turned the TV off. The room was instantly swallowed in silence, the kind that hums in your ears when the sound cuts out too quickly. I sat up in bed, ears perked, every muscle in my body stiff with alertness. And that's when I realized the knocking wasn't coming from the front door anymore. It was coming from my bedroom door. That slow, rhythmic pounding. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks again. It was right on the other side of the wood, maybe 6 feet from where I sat frozen in bed. My heart felt like it had stopped mid-beat. I leapt up, wild-eyed, scanning my room for anything I could use as a weapon. A lamp, a phone charger, anything. My brain was screaming and sluggish all at once, fogged by fear and adrenaline. Whoever it was, they knew I was awake now. I could hear it, the soft rattle of the doorknob, the subtle click-click as someone tried to twist it open. Then, Boom! They started slamming against it, throwing their weight against the door in an attempt to break in. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't kids. This was something else. Something real. By some absolute miracle, my panicked brain spat out an idea, a long shot, desperate, but it was all I had. I lunged toward my speaker system on the dresser, flipping on the receiver. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone as I plugged it in. Opened the YouTube app, searched as fast as I could. 45 gunshot sound effect. Clicked the first video I saw, maxed the volume, pressed play. Bang! A single deafening gunshot exploded from the speakers. It echoed through the house, sharp, aggressive, disturbingly real. The reverb off the walls made it feel like something had actually been fired inside the room. I hit pause after the first shot, then shouted in the most furious voice I could summon. "That was a warning shot. Leave now or I won't hesitate to shoot you in the head." Silence. Total, awful silence. And then, footsteps. 2 sets of them, heavy, fast, thumping across my hardwood floor. Whoever they were running. I heard the front door swing open with a slam and the sound of boots pounding down the porch steps. And just like that, gone. I waited. 10 seconds. 15. Then, slowly, I crept to the bedroom door and unlocked it. It creaked open, and I peered out into the hallway. Empty. The air felt different, still but wrong, like something had been there and left behind a residue you couldn't quite see. I moved toward the front of the house, every step careful and quiet. The door was wide open, just hanging there. No one outside, no sound, just the dark, empty street beyond the threshold. I slammed it shut, double-locked it again, then grabbed my phone and called the police. And that's where my story ends. I've never really been much of a Halloween person. Not because I hated it or anything, but growing up, I didn't exactly have a crowd to celebrate it with. After I passed the age of 10, I couldn't use the excuse of going out with my mom anymore, and it's not like I had a group of friends to join, so Halloween just kind of faded for me. This past Halloween, I was 14 years old. Still too young to feel like a real adult, but old enough to feel awkward going door to door alone, clutching a plastic pumpkin full of candy. I do have a little sister. She's only 8, so my mom, naturally, took her out trick-or-treating. My one good friend, Steve, already had plans that night, and I didn't want to impose or make it weird, so it looked like I'd be staying home again. Honestly, I didn't mind. In fact, a small part of me was actually relieved, maybe even happy, when my mom asked if I could stay behind and hand out candy. It felt like I had a reason not to go out, like I had a job to do, something better than walking the streets by myself like some lonely Halloween drifter. Mom left with my sister around 6. She'd just gotten home from work an hour earlier, still dressed in business casual, but already focused on face paint and candy bags. She told me she'd be back around 9, give or take. So, there I was, settled comfortably on the living room couch, wrapped in a blanket, flipping through channels until I landed on AMC's annual horror movie marathon. The house was quiet, except for the occasional doorbell ringing, and I'd hop up each time to hand candy to the parade of tiny vampires, witches, and superheroes. It was easy. It was calm. And then the kitchen phone rang. I still remember how loud the ringer was. It practically made me jump off the couch. I hadn't heard that landline ring in weeks, maybe months. I didn't even think anyone really used it anymore. I walked into the kitchen and picked up the receiver. "Hello?" I said. No response. Just silence. Except, not quite. There were faint noises, shuffling, maybe fumbling. That odd rustling background sound you get when someone's holding the phone too close to their clothes or mouth. It wasn't static, it wasn't a bad connection. It was deliberate, like someone was there, listening. "Hello?" I said again, then again, 5 times total probably, each one a little more uneasy than the last. Still nothing. And then, click. They hung up. I just stood there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, staring at the wall. Had to be a prank, a Halloween thing, some bored kid getting a kick out of dialing random numbers and creeping people out. Happens every year, right? What else could it be? I shrugged it off, hung up the phone, and headed back to the couch, trying my best to ignore the way that silence on the other end hadn't sounded like a joke. That little trick worked, well enough at least for the next few minutes. I went back to the living room, settled into the couch, and kept watching the horror marathon. Answered the door a few more times for the last stragglers out trick-or-treating. Things were starting to feel normal again, or close to it, until the phone rang. Again. Same number on the caller ID. Unknown. I stared at the display for a few seconds, torn between logic and instinct. Then curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the phone. There was no voice on the other end, no words, just a sound, faint, low, and unmistakable. Breathing. Soft and shallow, like someone holding the phone just a little too close to their nose. The kind of breathing that wasn't meant to be heard, but somehow was. "All right, Steve, I know it's you," I said, trying to force some confidence into my voice. I didn't believe it. Not really. But I needed to say something. Click. They hung up. This time, I didn't slam the receiver down. I just lowered it, slowly, quietly. I didn't want to admit I was scared, but I won't lie. I was uneasy. Deep down in my chest, something was starting to twist, like a small knot forming just behind my ribs. I kept telling myself it was a prank, just someone screwing around. But part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, not just annoying, but wrong. It was a long time before the phone rang again. The night crept along, the sky outside deepening from a dusky blue to pure black. The doorbell had stopped ringing almost entirely, just 1 or 2 knocks in the past 20 minutes. The streets were empty now. Halloween was winding down. I was watching the original Friday the 13th, a classic. I'd seen it before, but something about watching it alone, on Halloween night, in a dimly lit house, made it hit differently. And that's when it happened again. Ring! The kitchen phone shrieked to life. That sound, that shrill, piercing rattle, had become something almost sickening. I hated it. I hated how it made my heart stutter every time it went off. Because now I knew who it would be. Or worse, I didn't. For some reason I still can't explain, I picked it up again. Maybe I was hoping to finally catch them. Maybe I just wanted to hear something that would break the pattern and make this stop. But the silence returned, just like before. Only it wasn't total. There was still the faint, rhythmic breathing, and the sound of movement, rustling, fumbling, the same quiet noise of someone shifting the phone in their hand. It went on for almost 30 seconds. Then they spoke. The voice was low, deliberate, and clearly exaggerated, deepened on purpose, like they were playing a role in a horror movie. "I'll be paying you a visit tonight." I froze, just for a second, but inside I snapped. That was it. I'd had enough. "You know what? Go fuck yourself," I snapped into the receiver. "Get lost." And I slammed the phone down. My hand was shaking. I told myself right there and then I wasn't picking it up again, no matter what, no matter who called. I'd say it was about half an hour later. Out of nowhere, without warning, the entire house went dark. The lights flicked off. The TV screen cut to black. The quiet hum of electricity died in an instant. I was suddenly standing in complete darkness. My breath hitched, my whole body tensed. My first instinct was to look around, but there was nothing to see, just a blanket of black, thick and heavy. The kind of dark that makes you feel like the walls are closing in. And then came the sound. Bang! 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 Loud, angry pounding at the front door, fast, erratic, as if someone was slamming their fists into the wood in pure rage. That was it. I lost it. I started screaming, high-pitched, panicked, like I'd lost every shred of composure. I didn't care how I sounded. It was pure survival instinct now. But beneath my screams, I heard laughter. From outside. Not just any laughter. It was familiar. That stupid, unmistakable laugh. I rushed to the front door, heart racing, yanked it open. And there he was. Stephen, standing on the porch, doubled over, cackling like a maniac. I was so furious, I shoved him hard, nearly knocked him down the steps. "So that was you?" I shouted. "You made those dumb phone calls?" He nodded, still laughing, barely able to catch his breath. "Dude, it didn't even sound like you," I snapped. "Let me hear you do that voice again." He stopped laughing, blinked, looked at me with genuine confusion. "What voice?" he said. "I didn't say anything, you idiot. I just called and did that heavy breathing." The air shifted. Just like that. My stomach dropped. My legs went cold. I wanted to believe he was lying. I really, really did. But there was something in his tone, in his eyes, that didn't match the prankster grin he wore a second ago. I didn't say anything. I just turned and motioned for him to follow me. We hurried outside, around the side of the house, to the fuse box. The moment I saw it, my heart locked up in my chest. The panel was wide open. Wires, several, had been cleanly snipped. Stephen stared at it, silent now. And then we ran. I'm not exaggerating when I say we moved like Olympic sprinters, probably faster. We tore back into the house like it was the only safe place left on Earth, slammed the door shut, locked it, bolted it. I grabbed the phone and called my mom immediately. She was still out trick-or-treating with my sister. As soon as she picked up and I told her what happened, her voice changed, calm but serious. "Stay inside," she said. "Don't open the door for anyone. I'm calling the police right now." And she did. They traced the phone calls. They came from a payphone, one posted just outside a nearby bar. Someone had gone out of their way to do this, to watch, to scare, or maybe to do something worse. To this day, I don't know what the truth is. I still don't. Was it just a twisted Halloween prank taken way too far? Or was it something else? A potential break-in? A kidnapping? No. I try not to finish that thought. And honestly, I don't think I ever want to find out. When I was younger, Halloween was always one of the best nights of the year. My friends and I would go trick-or-treating every single year without fail, dressed in costumes, carrying pillowcases for candy, and soaking in the fun like it was our personal holiday. But there was one Halloween I'll never forget, and not for the reasons you'd hope. That year, everything started like normal. We were making our way down the street, going house to house, laughing, comparing candy hauls, when we saw him. A man. He stood completely still on the edge of a lawn, motionless like a Halloween decoration. He wore a mask, plain, pale, and unreadable, and held a lantern in one hand. The warm glow of it flickered against the bottom of his costume, but he didn't move. Not even a twitch. As we passed him, just trying to mind our business, his entire body pivoted, slow and mechanical, his masked face turning to follow us as we walked by. We laughed nervously, brushing it off as someone trying to be spooky. After all, it was Halloween. That kind of stuff was everywhere. And there were plenty of people around, adults, other trick-or-treaters. We figured he was just playing a part. So we moved on to the next house. But we saw him again. And again. No matter how far we walked, no matter how many houses we hit, he kept appearing. At first, just in the distance, standing still. Then closer. Then, somehow, ahead of us. We couldn't figure out how he kept getting there first. We were walking in a straight line. We weren't even moving that fast. And yet, somehow, he was always there, watching. Always just far enough away that we couldn't say anything, but always close enough to feel his presence. In true horror movie fashion, we never thought to turn around and go home. We just kept going. Slower, more unsure with each step. Our candy bags felt heavier. Our laughter started to fade. At one house, we finally thought we'd lost him. We hadn't seen the masked man for a while, and for the first time in what felt like ages, we actually relaxed a little. The porch light was on. A friendly couple answered the door, handed us some candy, and smiled warmly. But when we turned back toward the street, there he was, the masked man, standing in the middle of the road, still, facing us directly. We froze. The candy bags sagged in our hands, our hearts pounded in our ears. Without thinking, we spun back toward the house, practically banging on the door. The couple opened it again, startled, and we rushed to tell them what was happening, that someone was following us, that he had a mask, a lantern, that he kept showing up no matter where we went. They stepped outside and looked down the street. The masked man was walking again now, calm, deliberate, continuing down the road without a word, not running, not looking back. And then he was gone. We didn't see him for the rest of the night, but it didn't end there. Later, an adult friend of the family told us something that still makes my skin crawl. He'd been out that same night, walking the neighborhood, when he noticed something strange. A masked man, hiding behind a tree, waving small children over. He didn't move from the shadows, didn't speak, just waved, luring. It was only when our family friend threatened to call the police that the masked man finally backed off and disappeared into the dark. I don't know who he was. I don't know what he wanted. But I do know one thing. Not every Halloween scare is just a costume. I was out trick-or-treating with my friend Casey. We were both 11 years old at the time, just two kids dressed up for Halloween, going door to door with our bags slowly filling up with candy. It was the kind of crisp autumn night you expect on Halloween. Leaves crunching under our sneakers, cool air brushing past our costumes, that low hum of excitement mixed with sugar highs and distant laughter. At some point, our route took us across this small wooden bridge, the kind that creaked with every step. It stretched over a narrow, winding stream most people around town called Jack Winkle River. Just a quiet little waterway, nothing too remarkable. But what happened next changed everything. Just as we were halfway across the bridge, a black Jeep rolled up on the other side, smooth and silent at first, then came to a hard stop. Right there, blocking our path. The headlights were off, but we could still see the outline of it under the orange glow of the distant street lamp. For a second, neither of us moved. Then we turned. Didn't run, but definitely picked up the pace. We were the kind of kids who took the stranger danger rules seriously, and this screamed, "Don't get involved." As we walked quickly away, we heard the sound of the Jeep's windows rolling down behind us, soft at first, then all the way. A man's voice called out to us, raspy, rough, the kind of gravelly tone you'd expect from someone who'd been smoking a pack a day for decades. "Hey, come back! I need help! I'm lost! Need directions!" It was loud, urgent, but we didn't stop. "Sorry," I shouted back without turning around. And then we moved faster. The Jeep didn't follow us across the bridge. It was too narrow for a vehicle that size to fit over. So we figured we were in the clear. We thought we'd gotten away. But then, from the other end of the street, an SUV came flying around the corner. Fast, too fast. It barreled straight down the road, tires squealing slightly as it slammed on the brakes directly in front of us. We froze. It was just a few feet away now, the headlights glaring in our faces. The driver rolled the window down slowly, and that same feeling from before, the tight, stomach-dropping sensation, came flooding back. There were two other people inside, one in the passenger seat, silent, and another in the back. An older guy, gray, curly hair, thick mustache, leaned forward just enough for the dim dome light to hit his face. He smiled, but it wasn't warm. He had the same raspy smoker's voice. "Come on, kids," he said. "Get in. We've got bags of candy for you." Casey and I didn't speak. We didn't need to. Our legs just moved. Fast. We turned and started running, not toward a house, not toward anyone specific, just away. That's when we heard the sound behind us. The Jeep. It had looped around, and now it was following us again, slow at first, then faster. Stalking us from behind, its engine humming low and steady. It pulled ahead, past us, then screeched to a stop up the block. The back door flung open, then the front passenger door. Two of the men jumped out, fast. They didn't hesitate. They started lunging toward us. We didn't look back. We just ran, harder than we'd ever run in our lives. Our bags of candy dropped and forgotten on the sidewalk behind us. My house was in sight now, glowing at the end of the street like a lifeline. We sprinted toward it, hearts pounding, lungs burning, feet slapping the pavement. We reached the porch and started hammering the doorbell, over and over. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, at least 20 times. The panic was overwhelming. We were practically climbing over each other to press the button faster, shouting, crying, pleading for someone, anyone to answer. Behind us, we could hear footsteps, heavier, slower. The old men who jumped from the Jeep were still following, but they weren't fast, not nearly fast enough. And the second they saw where we were headed, my house, they stopped, hesitated, and then turned back. The Jeep was backing up now, slowly reversing down the road. Right then, the front door flew open, and my mom stood there wide-eyed. We screamed, pointed, "The Jeep!" We both shouted at once, breathless and panicked. She grabbed us by the shoulders and yanked us inside, slammed the door, locked every bolt and chain, and immediately grabbed the phone to call the police. She was shaking. Her voice wavered as she gave the details, reporting the black Jeep, 3 men inside, older, raspy voices, the way they followed us, chased us, tried to lure us. Every detail Casey and I could give, she relayed. My mom was absolutely freaking out, not just because of what had happened, but because now they knew where we lived. My dad did his best to calm her down, speaking softly, keeping his hand on her shoulder, trying to reassure her. But she couldn't relax, not even for a second. Eventually, the police told us they would send an unmarked patrol car to park nearby, just to keep an eye out to make sure we were safe. They said it would stay for 3 hours. It wasn't much, but it helped. My mom finally began to settle a little. But what really made us all feel better, what made everything change, came later that night. My dad woke us up. He knocked gently on the door and told us to come to the window. Outside, the street was lit up red and blue, flashing lights slicing through the dark. The unmarked police car had pulled over an SUV, and right there behind it was a black Jeep. And 3 men, those 3 old creeps, were in handcuffs. It was them. The same guys who had tried to kidnap me and Casey earlier that night. My dad stepped outside to talk to the officer. He must have confirmed what Casey and I had described, because the officers didn't hesitate. They kept the men detained. Casey and I ran to the doorway, standing just inside, and shouted for their attention. When they turned and looked at us, we both raised our hands and gave them the finger, double, unapologetically. My mom gasped and pulled us back inside, shutting the door behind us. "That's enough," she said, trying to sound stern, but we could hear the relief in her voice. She sent us to bed, and somehow we went. It had started as the worst night of our lives, but by the end, it had become the best. This story took place on Halloween night. After a few hours of trick-or-treating with my 7-year-old daughter, Jamie, we finally came home with our bags full of candy, our legs sore, and both of us ready to wind down. I made dinner while Jamie sorted through her candy haul. We ate together, watched some light TV, nothing too scary for her, and by the time it got late, I told her it was time for bed. She didn't argue too much. She was tired too. I helped her get tucked in, kissed her goodnight, and went to brush my own teeth. I was feeling unusually exhausted that night, like I could barely keep my eyes open, so I shut off the lights, crawled into bed, and let myself drift off. But not long after, Jamie came into my room. Her little face was pale, her voice quiet. "Daddy, there's someone in my closet." I blinked, still half asleep. "There's no one in your closet, sweetheart," I said gently, pulling back the covers. "You're just imagining things. Halloween can do that." She asked if she could sleep with me, but I gently shook my head. "You're safe in your room, Jamie, I promise." She didn't argue, but she hesitated, stood in the doorway for a second longer than usual, then slowly walked back to her room and shut the door. I told myself it was nothing. Kids get spooked after Halloween. That's just how it goes. Still, something tugged at the back of my mind, so I made a mental note. If she comes back again, I'll walk her to the closet and show her there's nothing to be afraid of. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, she came back. I sat up. "What is it, Jamie? Why do you think someone's in your closet?" She looked at me, eyes wide, voice even softer now. "I heard someone moving and stuff falling over." That stopped me cold. Just for a second, my heart gave a sharp, unnatural jolt, the kind you feel when something doesn't add up. "All right," I said, climbing out of bed. "Let's go check together." We walked back to her room. I turned on the lights and tried to keep the mood light. Standing in front of the closet, I said jokingly, "Okay, anyone hiding in there?" Jamie and I stood still, listening. I didn't expect anything. Really, I didn't. But then, thud. A dull, heavy noise. Muffled, but unmistakably real. From inside the closet. My skin went cold. "Jamie, go. Run to the neighbors, ring their bell, and call the police," I said sharply. She hesitated for a second, scared and confused, but I pushed her forward. She bolted out of the room. As soon as she was gone, I reached for the closet handle, adrenaline flooding every nerve in my body. I yanked the door open. And there, sitting cross-legged, squeezed awkwardly on top of Jamie's Lego box, was Randy, the neighbor's son, just sitting there, in the dark, in my daughter's closet. My shock immediately turned to fury. I grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and hauled him to his feet, yanking him out of the closet and out of the room. I said nothing. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth would crack. I marched him next door, gripping his arm tight, practically dragging him across the front lawn. There was Jamie, just reaching the neighbor's porch, frantically ringing the bell. When they answered the door, I shoved Randy forward, right into his father. I told them everything. How I found him, what Jamie said, what I heard, what I almost didn't believe. And then I looked his father dead in the eye. "I'm not pressing charges this time," I said. "But if I ever catch him near my daughter again," I didn't need to finish the sentence. They knew exactly what I meant. Randy's dad, Mark, stood frozen for a second, then suddenly slapped Randy across the face. The sound cracked through the night air like a whip. Randy barely flinched. Mark turned to me, looking ashamed, angry, confused. "Come inside," he said quietly. "Let him explain himself." I hesitated, but Jamie was still at my side, clutching my hand. We stepped inside together. The living room was dimly lit, eerily quiet, like the tension had sucked all the air out of the house. Randy slumped into a chair, rubbing his face, mumbling something under his breath. "Talk," Mark snapped. "Now." Apparently, while I had been out taking Jamie trick-or-treating, Randy had snuck into our house through an open window. He'd climbed in, uninvited, unnoticed, and he hadn't been alone. He'd brought his friend, a kid named Daryl, with him. They both hid in Jamie's closet for hours. I was stunned. For a moment, I didn't say anything. My thoughts were scrambling just to process the reality of it. "Is Daryl still in my house?" I asked, my voice low and tight. Randy nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so." That was all I needed to hear. I told Jamie to stay with Mark. Then I ran. Back across the lawn, back into my house. I didn't even bother locking the door behind me. I went straight to Jamie's room, and there he was. This Daryl kid, crouched down, uglier and shadier looking than Randy by a mile. He looked up at me just as I entered the room. In his hand, my daughter's underwear. What happened next wasn't planned. It wasn't calm. It wasn't rational. It was pure, protective fury. I lunged at him, grabbed the little bastard by the throat, and slammed him to the floor. I didn't think, I just reacted. I slapped him 4 times, hard, right across the face. Each hit louder than the last, my hand shaking from rage. He didn't fight back, didn't beg, just laid there, stunned. Eventually, I stood over him, chest heaving, fists still clenched. "Get out," I growled. I let him leave, only because of my long-standing friendship with Mark, and only because Jamie was still with them, probably scared out of her mind. But before I walked him to the door, I made sure he and Randy understood me loud and clear. "If either of you so much as look in my daughter's direction again, you'll be reading about yourselves on the news." They didn't say a word, just vanished into the night. Jamie slept with me that night. She was terrified, traumatized. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, as I tried to make some sense of what had happened, I went into her room. I opened the closet door again, this time carefully looking over everything. That's when I noticed it. A small drill hole in the closet door, just wide enough to see through. They were spying on her, watching her sleep, touching her things. No parent can understand the depth of that horror until it happens to them. And it did. There are many days I regret not calling the police. Many mornings I wake up wondering if I failed her by not pressing charges. I still could, I still can, but nothing has happened since. So I let it go. I've done everything in my power to protect Jamie since that night. She's 13 now. That creep Randy is away at college, but I still remember. I always remember. We had just moved into our new house. It was huge, far bigger than our old one, and nestled in a quiet neighborhood in Mississauga, Ontario, in an area called Winston Churchill. It was Halloween night, and instead of celebrating like most people, my parents, my 4 sisters, my brother, and I were busy unpacking boxes in our new bedrooms. We had only just finished when we all gathered in the hallway, talking in low voices about what we'd left behind. Old schools, old friends, the familiar places we already missed. Then Mom called out, telling us it was time to do chores. Chores at 11:30 p.m. I was exhausted, way past the Halloween buzz. The trick-or-treaters were long gone, and all I wanted to do was crawl into bed. But I didn't complain. We all got to it, dragging out the final tasks for what felt like forever. Finally, when I was done, I made my way to my new room, eager to crash. But just as I was settling under the covers, I heard it. Footsteps, soft but clear, creaking through the upstairs hallway. At first, I figured it was one of my siblings. Maybe someone was still wandering around, looking for something. I groaned, threw off my blanket, and got up, ready to yell at whoever it was for bothering me so late. But when I stepped into the hallway, there was no one there. The lights were dim, and everything was quiet, still. A cold, unsettling feeling crept up the back of my neck. I rushed downstairs, straight into the basement where the rest of the family was still unpacking and tidying up. My parents, my brother, and my sisters were all there, talking, moving, working, calm, normal. I asked them, quickly, a little too quickly, if anyone had just been upstairs. They all looked at me and said no. None of them had left the basement. Now I was really starting to get freaked out. But I didn't want to look crazy, so I forced myself to believe it had to be my imagination, just new house nerves. Maybe the sounds were settling wood or old pipes. I shrugged it off, said nothing more, and went back to my room. But now my bed felt different, cold, like ice. I had to pull on a sweater just to stay warm. The air in the room felt heavier too, denser, like the kind of chill that doesn't come from outside, but from somewhere else. Still, I managed to fall asleep, at least for a little while. But at exactly 12:30 a.m., I woke up again. The house was silent. Everyone else had gone to bed. I could feel it in the air, quiet, undisturbed, like the night had finally settled. And then I heard it. Bang! A loud, sudden thud that shook the walls slightly. It came again. Bang! It sounded like it was coming from my parents' bedroom. At first, I thought maybe it was one of my siblings getting up to get water or use the bathroom, too afraid to go alone in a strange new house. But I was wrong. The banging continued, louder, more deliberate, rhythmic, angry. It wasn't the sound of footsteps or someone moving furniture or even a door slamming from a draft. It was something else. I couldn't sleep, couldn't close my eyes with that noise pulsing through the walls. Eventually, I decided to check it out, because whatever it wasn't going to stop. I stepped into the hallway. It was completely empty, silent. Not even the faint creak of the house settling, just an unnatural stillness pressing in from all sides. My bare feet touched the cool floorboards, and my breath felt louder than it should have in the air around me. As soon as I entered the hallway, the banging stopped. Just like that. I stared at my parents' bedroom door, just for a moment. No movement, no sound. I don't know what I expected to see. Maybe someone stepping out, maybe the door rattling again. But it just sat there, still. After a long pause, I turned around and walked back to my room, trying to convince myself again that it had to be the house. New places always have quirks, old pipes, loose panels, warped vents. That's all it was. I climbed into bed. 2 minutes later, bang! It started again. Bang! Bang! Louder now, more deliberate, like fists. I froze beneath the blanket. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. A freezing chill crept up my spine and settled deep in my bones. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe right. I wanted to scream, but didn't. Instead, I just lay there, trying to convince myself it would stop again, trying to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Then, the door to my bedroom creaked open, slowly. It wasn't a swing, it was a gentle, deliberate push, that awful kind of slow that makes your breath catch. The hinges groaned ever so slightly as the door eased open. The room was too dark to see anything clearly, just shadows on shadows. But I knew someone, or something, was there. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? Who is it? Let me go back to sleep," I muttered, trying to sound annoyed instead of terrified. No answer, just the sound of very light footsteps, soft, careful. They moved toward my bed. I told myself it was one of my sisters. Maybe they were trying to prank me or needed something. But as the steps grew closer, I realized something didn't feel right. The footsteps stopped. I rolled onto my side, slowly, eyes adjusting to the dark. And that's when I saw it. Standing next to my bed. Not my sister, not anyone from my family. A figure, at least 7 feet tall, its head nearly brushing the ceiling. Motionless, watching me. My throat tightened, my body locked up. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, couldn't do anything. Then, in a low, dry whisper, the figure said, "Boo." That single word unlocked everything in me. I screamed, loud, so loud it felt like my lungs would tear open. I threw the blanket over my face and curled into a ball, every nerve screaming in panic. Within seconds, my parents burst into the room. They flipped on the lights, and the figure was gone. There was no one standing beside my bed, just me, sobbing, panicked, pointing at the empty space. I told them everything, the thumping on the door, the footsteps, the towering figure, the voice. My siblings had all gathered in the doorway by then, watching me like I'd lost my mind. I turned to my parents. "You had to hear the banging. It was your door." But they just shook their heads slowly. "No," my mom said gently. "There was no knocking, not that we heard." They looked at me with that mixture of concern and disbelief, like I was dreaming, like I was crazy. But I'm not. I know what I saw. You can't just imagine something like that, something so vivid, so real. No, I was awake, and I wasn't alone. I'll never forget this night. I know I won't, no matter how much time passes. It happened a few years ago on Halloween night. We were all 20 years old, right in that sweet spot where haunted house attractions are the thing to do on Halloween. Old enough to not need candy anymore, but still young enough to chase a good scare. The attraction was called Scare House: Journey to the Basement, or something close to that. It had this cult reputation in our town. People whispered about how crazy it was, how intense. But it was only open for 4 straight years, and then just vanished. No explanation, no return. This was its 4th and final year. And we went. Let me tell you, this wasn't some cheap, thrown-together haunted house. It was high quality, the kind of place that clearly had time, money, and twisted imagination poured into it. The detail, the lighting, the sound design, Everything was surprisingly terrifying, and I've been to a lot of these kinds of attractions. But what made it stand out most was how it worked. It wasn't a tour-guided experience like most haunted houses. No one was walking you through with flashlights or pointing out cheap jump scares. This was different. It was a group exploration attraction. Basically, a maze. The goal? Find your way to the basement, locate one of several keys hidden there, and then find the final exit door to unlock and escape. No shortcuts, no hints. Just you, your friends, and whatever the hell they had waiting for you in that house. It was chaotic, unique, terrifying in the best way. We were excited, nervous, ready for a scare and a good time. But unfortunately, it wasn't a good night for us. Not at all. And you're about to understand why. We started out in the living room of the house, and let me give you as much detail as I can, because this room set the tone immediately. Right in the center of the room, there was a giant open coffin, like it was waiting for someone to climb in. It wasn't just a prop, it felt too real. The edges were aged, chipped. There were old, rust-colored stains inside that I didn't want to look too closely at. Every inch of every corner was covered in thick, convincing spiderwebs, hanging from the ceiling beams, stretching between the antique furniture. Dust coated everything. The furniture looked like it had been pulled from some abandoned Victorian home. Crooked-legged chairs, a sagging sofa, and a massive fireplace that hadn't seen flames in decades. And on the creaky wooden floor, dark streaks of bloodstains ran in random, horrifying directions, as if someone had been dragged. We looked at each other and knew we were in for something good. The next room was the dining room, and that's when things started to shift. It felt off. The space was darker, the fake cobwebs thicker. The room had this sickly smell, something between rotting wood and damp metal. And on the creaky wooden floor, dark streaks of bloodstains ran in random, horrifying directions, as if someone had been dragged. We looked at each other and knew we were in for something good. The next room was the dining room, and that's when things started to shift. It felt off. The space was darker, the fake cobwebs thicker. The room had this sickly smell, something between rotting wood and damp metal. From there, we moved through a series of rooms, all dimly lit by artificial lanterns hooked to the walls. The light flickered just enough to disorient us, like the flame might blink out any second. Shadows crawled across the walls. And, of course, actors jumped out at us from time to time. Clad in grotesquely realistic costumes, bloated, bloodied, inhuman. They didn't say a word, just lunged, screamed, or stood too close for too long. We expected the scares, but they still got me, every time. We spent a lot of time just wandering in circles, trying to find the basement. It wasn't like a normal house layout. This place was deliberately twisted. Narrow hallways, dead ends, fake doors that led to nowhere. It was a maze built to trap you. It took what felt like forever to finally find the door to the basement. And I'll admit it, my stomach dropped. I was nervous. The door was narrow, with a cold metal handle that stuck when we tried to turn it. The moment it creaked open, a wall of cold air hit us in the face. It was pitch black down there, like truly black, not dim, not shadowy, just void. At first, we thought we'd made a mistake, that maybe we'd wandered into an off-limits employees-only area where they stored props or equipment. It didn't even feel like part of the attraction anymore. And the worst part? No phones allowed. It had been stated clearly, no cell phone use inside the attraction. No lights, no flash photography. So even if we wanted to pull out our phones and use the screens to light the way, we couldn't. If we wanted to get out, we had to go down. One by one, we stepped onto the old staircase. Every step creaked, loudly, painfully. That specific kind of sound that pierces your ears and makes your skin crawl, like fingernails on a chalkboard, but worse. Despite the fear, we were laughing, trying to keep things light, cursing under our breath, whispering how freaked out we were. I stretched out my hands in front of me like I was blind, trying to feel anything in the dark. Then, I bumped into someone, hard. "Sorry," I whispered, laughing nervously. "Who was that?" No answer. Silence. Then, a hand landed on my shoulder. I froze. A moment passed. Then I ran, screaming, laughing, panicking. There was something about being in that massive, pitch-black basement, knowing someone was in there with us, someone we couldn't see, that was so deeply, viscerally disturbing. Thankfully, one of my friends, shaking just as much as the rest of us, found a key sitting on top of an old wooden desk in the corner of the room. No one said a word. We just ran, back up the stairs, back to the dim lanterns, back to the light. We didn't stop until we found the exit door and used the key to escape. The actual experience of getting through that twisted maze of a haunted house was much longer and way more confusing than this story probably makes it sound. But that wasn't the horrifying part. No, that came after. Just outside the exit door, there was a small black bin on a pedestal with a hand-painted sign that read, "Drop keys here, please." It was simple enough. That's how the staff would collect the keys and return them back down to the basement for the next group. We tossed our key in and walked off the property, still laughing, still buzzing from the adrenaline. But somewhere inside, we all felt just a little off, like something still hadn't settled. We were only halfway off the haunted house's premises when the exit door creaked open again behind us. We turned, and a really tall figure stepped out. He was dressed in a long, flowing black robe and wore a bloody pig mask, the snout smeared in red, the eyes nothing but hollow voids. It looked like latex, but unsettlingly real under the dim streetlight. At first, we assumed he was another actor, just part of the show. But then, he started following us. Slowly, deliberately. He, or she, but it looked and moved like a he, so I'll stick with that, didn't say a word, just walked. Same pace as us, same direction. Still, we didn't panic. We figured he was staff, maybe just sticking to character, giving one last scare before heading home. But the further away we got from the haunted house, the further he followed. One of my friends finally turned around and called out, "We don't have the key. If that's what you're after, we dropped it in the bin." But the figure didn't respond, didn't even react. He just kept walking. That's when the joke started. Just for fun, just to see what would happen, we broke into a run. And sure enough, so did he. Long strides, robe flapping, mask fixed straight ahead. We stopped. He stopped. We stood completely still. So did he. At first, we laughed again, nervous chuckles. We thought maybe it was part of the attraction, a last-minute prank by a dedicated actor going the extra mile. But then we kept walking, and he kept following. 5 blocks, that's how long he followed us. And by then, the tension had shifted completely. It wasn't funny anymore. We were approaching our friend Eddie's house, and we all started quietly discussing if it was even safe to go there. We weren't sure if we wanted this guy knowing where Eddie lived. But we figured both of Eddie's parents were home. It was the safest place we could think of. So we picked up the pace a little. The guy didn't sprint anymore, but he didn't back off either.